The moment Dad and I walked into the children's home, a stream of text floated past my eyes. Oh no, it's happening. The villainess is about to pick the heroine. I can't watch. Why can't she just get lost? Our precious girl was supposed to stay here and struggle alongside the male lead. If it weren't for this wicked side character, the main couple would have gotten together ages ago. The hero wouldn't have developed that inferiority complex or been so insecure later on. If the villainess just disappeared, the heroine could have tucked it out with him. With his brains, they'd have ended up way better off than her. I froze. Wait. What struggled together? Who in their right mind wants to suffer? My gaze fell on a frail looking girl standing nearby.
E punted, Daddy, E.
I want her to be my sister. Hearing me, a boy from across the yard, his eyes burning with resentment, rushed over. He grabbed the girl and pulled her behind him. Naomi is not going with you. The floating comments instantly erupted with excitement. He's been reborn. The male lead is back. Girl is saved. Yes. As long as the heroine doesn't leave with the villainess. This will be a fluffy romance, not one of those toxic angst dramas. I stared at the defiant boy in front of me and pursed my lips. Unimpressed. Toxic drama. Suffering together. Had the world gone completely mad? I stepped forward and took the girl's hand. Naomi, I said, using the name I'd heard the boy shout. You want to come home with us? My house is really big and we have tons of delicious food. The girl, Naomi, looked at me timidly, a flicker of light finally returning to her eyes. But before she could answer, the little boy shoved me aside. Stay away from Naomi. Don't think you can just force people to do what you want, because your family has a little money. The director hurried over to intervene. Sean, what do you think you're doing? Sean's face was a mask of disgust. If she goes with you, she'll become just as spoiled and arrogant as you. She promised she'd stay here with me. My father frowned, then looked at me. Ivy, are you sure you want this young lady? I rubbed my shoulder where the boy had pushed me. It stung. Still, I nodded. Naomi was actually one of the children the director had recommended. When I first saw her photo, I'd felt an instant connection. There was something about her, the air of vulnerability, that made me want to protect her. But ever since I'd set foot in this place, both the floating comments and the so-called male lead, Sean, had been trying to stop me. I just didn't get it. Did people really prefer a life of hardship over a life of comfort? I held out my hand again, offering Naomi my sweetest smile. Naomi, would you like to come home with me? If you do, just come over here. Okay? Naomi wrung her hands. He took a half step forward, but Sean yanked her back again. Naomi, don't go with her. Rich people like them will just corrupt you. I stomped my foot in frustration. What is wrong with you? I'm trying to give my new sister a better life. Just keep getting in the way. Are you just jealous? Sean's body went rigid. He shot me a venomous glare, like I'd want any of it. The director, clearly thinking Sean was being unreasonable, tried to have a caregiver lead him away, but he dodged her. He pulled Naomi aside and started whispering furiously in her ear. The director sighed. Sean used to be such a well-behaved boy. I don't know what's gotten into him the last few days. He's been acting so strange. Hearing this, my dad glanced at Naomi, who was still being held captive by Sean Ivy. Maybe we should choose someone else. There are lots of other boys and girls here. I patted and turned my head away. No, I only want her. As soon as I said it, the comments started scrolling frantically again. She's so malicious. Is she doing this on purpose? Just to break them up? If the heroine goes with her, the hero will be left to suffer all alone in the orphanage. He's so awkward. No one else wanted to adopt him. That's why he didn't meet our girl again. Until college. It's all this villain's fault. I shot a cool glance at the text. What a bunch of jerks. Why should she have to suffer with him? And what's so bad about coming with me? The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I was the one trying to help her. Why was everyone treating me like the bad guy? I huffed and kicked a loose pebble on the ground. After a few moments, I felt a pair of eyes on me. I followed the gaze. Boy with strikingly handsome features was sitting on a nearby bench. I blinked, then slowly walked over to him. Why are you sitting here all by yourself? He shifted uncomfortably and turned away, holding up a book reading. No, you weren't. I leaned in, my head tilted. You were totally staring at me. I turned to the director.
Mom.
Is this boy from the home, too? The director's smile was a little tight. Yes. His name is Jasper. I smiled at Jasper. Do you want to come home with me? The comments went wild again. Wait, how did the villain and the villainess meet this early? She didn't even see him when she visited the orphanage. In the original story, if these two troublemakers team up, our hero and heroine are going to have a miserable time, aren't they? My eyes lit up as I read the comments. So this boy and I were supposed to know each other. Later on, I reached out and tugged on his sleeve. What do you say you can be my brother? Jasper pretended to be absorbed in his book, whatever. That was all the confirmation I needed. I grabbed his hand and marched him over to my dad. Daddy, I've made up my mind. I want Jasper to be my brother and Naomi to be my sister. If you say yes, I'll promise to listen to everything you say from now on. Okay? My dad just shook his head, a helpless smile on his face. You and your whims. What am I going to do with you? I giggled, then looked over at Naomi, who was still talking with Sean. I cupped my hands around my mouth and shouted, Naomi, we're going home now.
Come on.
Naomi's head snapped up, her face filled with surprise, delight. I gave her a radiant smile and held out my hand again. Hurry, let's go home together. A huge grin spread across Naomi's face as she ran over and took my hand. Just as we were about to leave, she turned back to Sean. I don't think Ivy is the kind of person you say she is, so please don't talk about her like that anymore. The comments were furious. Is the heroine brainwashed? How can she talk to the male lead like that? He's already been corrupted by the villainess, daring to talk back to him. Now she deserves it when he cheats on her later. I wouldn't want a woman like that either. But she didn't do anything wrong. I was grabbing her in public. It's only natural for a girl to defend herself. I pouted. What was their problem? A bunch of biased comments that only cared about the male lead. What did my new sister do to deserve this? Once the paperwork was done and we were in the car, I held on to my new brother and sister, one in each hand. Now Ivy Croft has a brother and a sister. Let's see who dares to make fun of me now. In the car, I noticed Naomi looked a little tense, so I scooted closer to her. Don't be scared, Naomi. It's just me and Daddy at home tonight. I'll have our cook, Mrs. Gable, make you Coca-Cola glazed ribs. They're the best. Naomi nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Ivy, I think you're really nice. Nothing like what Sean said. He even told me you didn't really like me and wouldn't pick me. I'm so happy. Thank you for bringing me with you. See, I'm a super duper good person. I'm taking you home to give you a wonderful life. I sniffed. I'd never even met him before, and he was already bad-mouthing me.
He's the mean one.
Naomi gently tucked a stray strand of my hair behind my ear. You know, the first time I saw you, I liked you right away. You looked so sweet and cuddly. John is usually a nice person, but he was acting so weird today. Thinking about what the comments said about him being reborn, I decided to just ignore it. Forget about him. You're coming home with me. Ivy Croft, finally have a brother and a sister. From now on, I'll protect you both. I glanced at Jasper, who was still sitting silently beside me, and nudged him with my elbow. Jasper, why are you so quiet? Jasper cleared his throat. Sore throat. My eyes widened. I leaned over the front seat. Dad called Dr. Peterson to the house quick. My brother has a sore throat. Dad patted my arm.
Sit down. Sit down.
We'll have him looked at when we get home. It's okay. I nodded and took Jasper's hand, patting it reassuringly. Don't worry, brother. Dr. Peterson gives shots that don't hurt at all. If you're scared, I can cover your eyes for you, and you won't feel a thing. Jasper's face turned beet red. I'm not scared, he muttered. My eyes grew wide. You're not? You're not even scared of shots. Naomi quietly raised her hand. I'm not scared either. I was even more astonished.
What?
Neither of you were scared? Jasper just grunted in affirmation. I pouted, feeling a little challenged. Well, I'm not scared either. Besides, Dad said, you stop being scared when you grow up. They were already grown up when I was their age. I wouldn't be scared either. When we got home, Mrs. Gable had a feast waiting for us. I pulled my new siblings to the dining table. Coca-Cola, glazed ribs, slow-cooked brisket, honey garlic chicken wings.
These are all my favorites.
You have to try them. Mrs. Gable is the best cook in the world. Dad shook his head with a fond smile and ruffled my hair. What do we do before we eat? Wash our hands, I shouted. With that, I dragged them both to the sink. The table. Dad piled food onto their plates. Don't be shy here. This is your home now. If you want anything, just tell Mrs. Gable we are family. Naomi's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. Jasper didn't say anything, but I saw him trying to hide by burying his face in his bowl of rice. I quickly put a piece of brisket on his plate. Eat up, Jasper. There's plenty more if you're still hungry. After dinner, the clothes Dad had ordered for them arrived. Pointed to the boxes on the floor. Go on, try them on. My brother and sister deserve to wear the very best. Naomi's hands trembled as she touched a soft dress. Is all of this for me? I nodded enthusiastically. Yep, it's all for you guys. Dad smiled and took out 2 debit cards, handing one to Jasper and one to Naomi. I'm not always home, so if you need to buy anything, you can do it yourselves or just ask Mrs. Gable. I'll put a monthly allowance on these cards. If it's not enough, just send me a message. Don't feel like you have to save it. Seeing their hesitation, I snatched the cards from Dad and pressed them into their hands.
Don't be polite.
We're family, remember? Jasper nodded firmly.
Right, family.
Suddenly, Naomi wrapped me in a hug. Ivy, thank you so much. I scratched my head, feeling a little embarrassed. It's nothing really. That night, because it was my first time having a sister, I begged Naomi to sleep in my room with me, lying in my big, soft bed. Naomi let out a long sigh. Ivy, did you know I never even had my own bed before?
What?
I turned to face her.
Why not?
Naomi bit her lip, as if recalling something painful. My birth parents, they didn't like me. They only wanted my little brother. They sent me to live with my grandparents, but they didn't like me either, because I was a girl. Then my brother accidentally started a fire.
He and my parents.
I didn't make it. My grandparents couldn't handle the grief, and they passed away soon after. None of my other relatives wanted me, so they just left me at the orphanage gates. I gently wiped a tear from her cheek. It's okay. It's okay. Now I like you. When I heard you choose Jasper today, I really thought I had lost my chance. Naomi sniffled. So, when you called my name, I was so surprised. I couldn't believe someone would choose me, and be so determined about it. I threw my arms around her and held her tight. Of course I chose you. I wanted you from the very beginning. Don't cry. Don't cry. When she kept crying, I started making silly faces at her, until I finally coaxed a smile out of her. Naomi let out a little laugh. From now on, I'll always be good to you. I grinned and nodded. When I woke up, Naomi was already gone. I rushed downstairs to find Jasper up, too, already reading a book. It seemed I was the only one who slept in. I flopped down next to Jasper. Brother, why are you always reading? I have a game console, you know. Wanna play? After I finish this, I need to study hard. Jasper ruffled. Jasper didn't look up right away. His thumb stayed hooked beneath the lower corner of page 114, pressing the thin paper flat against the wood of his lap. When he finally lifted his chin, his dark eyes had that cautious, evaluating stillness that always made him look 3 years older than he actually was. If I don't study, he said, his voice level and gravelly from sleep, how am I supposed to help your father run the firm when we're older? I blinked, rocking back on my heels. You're 9. 9 is plenty old enough to start learning corporate logistics, he replied, with deadpan solemnity. Across the room, the kitchen door swung open with a soft, rubber gasket thump, and Naomi stepped out holding a tray lined with red checkered napkins. She was wearing the lilac cardigan Dad had bought her the previous evening. The sleeves were an inch too long, turned up at the cuffs in neat, precise folds. The tentative, frightened hunch of her shoulders from yesterday hadn't completely vanished, but the dark circles beneath her eyes had softened into faint shadows. Mrs. Gable made cinnamon rolls, Naomi whispered, as if speaking too loudly in the sunlit breakfast parlor might shatter the silver spoons. She said we're allowed to take as many as we want, even the ones with the extra glaze. A sudden flicker of pale neon light rippled across my peripheral vision. Look at her acting like a pampered princess already. The heroine used to wake up at 5 a.m. to sweep the orphanage courtyard with Sean. This whole timeline is rotting from the inside out. Sean is currently sharing a single bowl of watery congee with the younger kids at St. Jude's while she gorges on pastries. How can she eat that without feeling guilty? Just wait until middle school. A girl raised on unearned luxury always turns
shallow.
Sean will build his own empire from the dirt up, and she'll realize what a mistake she made ditching him. I stared directly at the spot where the glowing text floated above the bread basket, narrowing my eyes. Guilty for eating a cinnamon roll? I thought back at the empty air. If you're male, lead wants to eat cold congee to prove some bizarre point to the universe, he can go right ahead and choke on it. Ivy. Naomi had halted halfway to the table, her hands tightening on the tray handles. Her eyes darted toward the empty space I had been glaring at, then back to my face, terrified she had somehow done something wrong. Did you not want cinnamon? I want 3 of them, I declared, jumping up from the sofa and grabbing her elbow to pull her toward the low dining table. And Mrs. Gable promised me the center ones. Jasper put the logistics manual away before I pour whole milk directly onto the binding. Jasper closed the book with a deliberate snap, though I noticed he carefully slipped a woven ribbon between the pages first. That would be a waste of dairy products and property. Then sit down and eat sugar like a normal person. He sat. He didn't take the biggest roll, but when I shoved the stickiest, most frosting-laden pastry onto his small plate, he didn't push it back either. Naomi sat between us, her legs dangling from the plush dining chair, her shoulders gradually lowering as she took her first bite. The sweetness was warm, buttery, and real. Whatever garbage the floating text was spewing about noble suffering couldn't survive the smell of melted butter. The Croft family did not believe in halfway measures. Once Dad signed the adoption papers, our lives ceased to be a quiet triangle and turned into a bustling, well-oiled household of four. Naomi was enrolled in the same private elementary academy as I was, St. Jude's Preparatory, a red brick institution with ivy-strangled archways and a music program that cost more per semester than a mid-sized sedan. Jasper, having tested out of standard fourth-grade mathematics on his third day with us, was placed in the accelerated wing 2 doors down the hall. For the first 6 months, the floating text made sporadic appearances mostly, shrieking about how Naomi's pure, untainted spirit was being systematically destroyed by ballet lessons and private violin tutoring. Look at her hands. Her hands were meant to hold calluses from hard labor, so Sean could kiss them under the streetlight in Chapter 40. Now she's playing Chopin?
Disgusting.
The villainess is turning our heroine into a carbon copy of herself. When Sean sees her at the interschool science fair, he won't even recognize her. The science fair arrived in late November. The municipal convention center smelled like damp wool coats, vinegar from baking soda, volcanoes, and ozone. St. Jude's had rented the entire central corridor, displaying complex botany setups and circuit boards beneath crisp, branded banners. Naomi and I had spent 2 weeks cataloging the pH levels of urban rainwater, using digital titration kits Dad had bought for our sunroom. Jasper stood beside our display board, dressed in his school blazer, holding our spare clipboards with the grim efficiency of an executive bodyguard. Naomi. The voice was thin, sharp, and carried that unmistakable, theatrical rasp of aggrieved self-righteousness. I turned around. Sean stood at the edge of our aisle. He looked smaller than he had in my memory, his knees peeking through a pair of fraying trousers, his St. Jude's public sector uniform shirt missing a top button. His jaw was clenched so tightly that the tendons in his neck looked like taut twine. Behind him, 3 other boys from the public orphanage district hung back, looking uncomfortable and out of place among the polished walnut display tables. The text flared in violent, electric crimson across my vision. He's here. The king has entered the arena. Look at that fire in his eyes. Even in rags, his nobility outshines these trust fund parasites. Sean, take back what's yours. Remind her of the promise.
Sean didn't look at me.
He didn't look at Jasper. His eyes locked onto Naomi, zeroing in on her tailored navy skirt, her polished leather shoes, and the velvet ribbon holding her dark hair away from her face. You've changed, Sean said. It wasn't a greeting, it was an accusation. Naomi took half a step backward, her shoulder lightly bumping against mine. Her hand sought out my sleeve, her fingers curling into the wool of my blazer.
San?
What are you doing here? I entered the regional mechanics bracket, he said, his chin tilting upward.
He
held up a crude wooden housing containing a hand-cranked copper dynamo. I built it with scrap parts from the yard behind the home. Real engineering, not some store-bought vanity project paid for by someone else's father. Jasper stepped forward, his eyes traveling from Sean's dynamo down to the loose wiring trailing beneath the wooden base. Your polarity is inverted on the secondary coil, Jasper said flatly. If you turn that crank past 30 RPM, the heat buildup will melt your solder. Sean's face flushed and ugly, mottled red. Nobody asked you, Croft. You're just a lapdog who learned to bark on command because they gave you a warm bed.
San.
Naomi's voice wasn't loud, but it was sharper than I had ever heard it. She stepped out from behind me, her chin coming up to match his. Don't you dare
talk to Jasper like that.
He spent 4 days helping us calibrate the data logs. By hand. Sean looked as if she had slapped him with a wet towel. What? The heroine is defending the villain against the hero? She's completely lost her mind. Sean built that dynamo with his bare hands, while she sat in an air-conditioned manor. How can she be so ungrateful? Sean, show her the truth. Break through the brainwashing. Naomi, listen to me, Sean said, lowering his voice to a desperate urgent.
Hiss.
He took 2 strides forward, reaching out a grime-streaked hand to grab her wrist. You don't belong with these people. They're using you.
In a few
Years. When they get tired of playing charity, they'll discard you. You promised. We'd get out of St. Jude's together. We were supposed to build our future from nothing. I never promised to suffer with you, Sean, Naomi said clearly. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. Her voice had the crisp, unyielding clarity of someone who had finally seen 2 different paths laid out on a map and realized one led directly into a bottomless bog. You wanted to stay in the home because you wanted everyone to see how hard your life was, she said, her brown eyes unwavering. You liked being the boy who carried the heavy boxes while everyone watched. But I was cold, Sean. I was cold. Every single night, and when Ivy held out her hand, she asked me if I wanted to
come home.
She didn't ask me to be her martyr. Sean's hand hovered in the empty air between them, trembling. You're weak.
If
You can't endure hardship you'll never be worthy of. Move along, son. The voice dropped from above, like a slab of granite. Dad had appeared at the end of the aisle, holding 3 cardboard cups of hot cider from the cafeteria.
he
Didn't raise his voice, but his broad frame and immaculate charcoal overcoat completely blocked the aisle's overhead light, casting Sean in a deep shadow. The judges are reviewing the 7th-grade exhibits on the North Concourse, Dad said, his eyes resting on Sean with cool, detached appraisal. I suggest you return to your station before you receive a deduction for abandoning your post. Sean backed away slowly, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with a venom that felt entirely too heavy, too ancient, for a 10-year-old child. This isn't over, he spat, glaring at me. You think your money can buy everything, Ivy? History has a way of balancing the ledger. He spun on his heel and disappeared into the crowd. I looked up at the air above my head. The hero's awakening arc has been triggered early. Chapter 80's Vengeance. Plotline is starting now. Just wait until high school, Ivy Croft, you'll pay for every tear Sean shed today. I reached out, took a cup of hot cider from Dad, and handed it to Naomi. Drink this, I said. It has extra cinnamon. Naomi took the cup, her fingers wrapping around the warm cardboard. She looked toward the aisle where Sean had vanished, then turned back to me, the faint ghost of a smile touching the corners of her mouth. He really is weird, she whispered. Deeply, Jasper agreed, adjusting his glasses. And his coil was definitely going to melt. Time, as it turned out, did not balance the ledger in the way the glowing text expected. By the time we entered St. Jude's Senior Academy at 15, the floating comments had devolved into a bizarre, running subcommentary that felt less like a prophetic decree and more like a disgruntled message board whose favorite sports team had lost 15 games in a row. Why is Naomi taking advanced organic chemistry? She was supposed to major in early childhood education and work 3 part-time jobs at a convenience store. Jasper just won the National Informatics Olympiad. That algorithm was supposed to belong to Sean's collegiate startup in the original timeline. How did the villain get it first? Sean is working 60 hours a week as a mechanic's apprentice while attending night school. His perseverance is so moving. Why won't the author show his perspective more? I sat on the low stone wall bordering the academy's central quadrangle, swinging my legs while eating an apple. Jasper sat 2 feet away with an open laptop, balanced on his knees, his fingers clicking rhythmically across the keyboard as he debugged a distributed systems framework he was testing for a university laboratory. Across the lawn, Naomi was sitting on a plaid blanket surrounded by 4 girls from the pre-med track, dissecting a thick binder of comparative anatomy notes. She was laughing, her dark hair catching the autumn sun, looking radiant, healthy, and entirely unburdened by destiny. Sean transferred, Jasper said without looking up from his monitor. I paused, my apple halfway to my mouth. Transferred where?
here.
Senior Academy. General Scholarship track. Jasper tapped the enter key with a sharp, metallic click. Sponsored by an anonymous alumni development fund. He starts Monday. I let out a slow whistle. He spent 5 years clawing through public night school just to end up in our homeroom. His academic performance in applied mechanics is undeniably high, Jasper remarked, his voice devoid of emotion. He is driven by a profound, pathological desire to prove that our existence is an insult to the cosmos. Such motivation often produces high test scores. You talk like an 80-year-old tenure-track professor. I talk like someone who doesn't want our family's venture capital branch blindsided by industrial sabotage 3 years from now. Jasper finally glanced over at me, his eyes dark and intensely focused. I looked at his public
Portfolio.
He's filed 2 provisional patents on hydraulic valve assemblies. Both of them infringe on concepts our father's firm registered 4 years ago. Did he copy them? No, Jasper said quietly. He didn't need to. He had the conceptual framework in his head before he even had access to the machine tools. It's as if he remembered the blueprints rather than deriving them. A chill ran down my spine. The comments hadn't lied about that part. Sean was reborn. He had lived an entire lifetime where he was the celebrated genius, the self-made titan who conquered the city with Naomi clinging adoringly to his arm. He had arrived in this life expecting the world to bend to his script. Instead, he had found me, a girl who liked ribs, loved her sister, and had completely derailed his tragic masterpiece on day one. What's the play? I asked, tossing my apple core into a nearby receptacle. We don't need a play, Jasper said, shutting his laptop. We simply do what we have always done, exist competently, protect Naomi, and let him exhaust himself against reality. Reality, however, had a way of getting messy. Sean's arrival at the senior academy did not result in the glorious triumph the floating text had promised. He walked through the stone corridors with a perpetual scowl, refusing to wear the standard academy blazer, opting instead for a worn canvas jacket that violated the dress code every single morning. He treated the other scholarship students with a haughty, distant superiority, viewing them as background extras in his grand ascension, while regarding the wealthier students with open
Disgust.
He's so principled. The comments cheered frantically. Look at him, refusing to conform to the bourgeois aesthetic. The girls in class are just blind. If they looked past his rough exterior, they'd see a dragon waiting to wake up. Unfortunately for Sean, teenage girls in an elite academic academy were generally not looking for angry dragons who smelled like gear oil and refused to participate in group projects. The crisis came during the second semester of our junior year during the regional biotechnology incubator competition held in the school's newly built science wing. Our team, Naomi, Jasper, and I had developed a microfluidic assay designed for rapid, low-cost water contamination testing. Dad had provided zero funding for the project. Jasper had written the sensor logic, Naomi had developed the biological reagents in the lab after hours, and I had handled the logistics, supply procurement, and presentation deck. The night before the final presentation, I realized I had left our primary slide deck backup drive in the third-floor prep lab. When I pushed the heavy oak door open at 7:30 p.m., the lights were off, save for the green glow of a single workstation in the corner. Sean stood over our workstation, a portable flash drive plugged into the main diagnostic terminal. The text was scrolling at breakneck speed, filling the darkened room with ghostly, stuttering white light. Yes. Steal the code. It was supposed to be Sean's innovation anyway.
The
villain stole his destiny, so Sean is just reclaiming what's rightfully his. Once he presents the microfluidic model tomorrow morning under his name, the Croft family's fraud will be exposed. I didn't scream. I didn't drop my keys. I just reached to my left and flipped the master light switch. The fluorescent banks hummed to life with a blinding, sterile snap. Sean froze, his hand still resting on the terminal's chassis. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't look like a boy caught stealing. He slowly straightened up, his face hardening into that familiar, venomous expression of righteous indignation. You shouldn't be here, Ivy, he said. You're copying Naomi's reagent synthesis logs, I said, leaning back against the door frame and crossing my arms. And Jasper's sensor calibration code. Naomi's logs? Sean let out a dry, rasping laugh that sounded completely unhinged in the quiet room. Naomi doesn't know anything about microfluidics.
In
the original, in the real world, she couldn't balance a checkbook without
crying.
You gave her everything on a silver platter, had your private tutors do the thinking for her, and put her name on the cover so she could play scientist. She spent 6 months working until midnight with cultures that gave her chemical migraines, Sean. I said evenly. She failed 82 trials before she stabilized the substrate. You'd know that if you ever looked at her work, instead of staring at her like she's a trophy you lost in a poker game. Sean ripped the flash drive from the port, his knuckles whitening. He took 2 long, threatening strides toward me, towering over me in the narrow aisle between the slate-topped lab benches. You ruined her, he whispered, his eyes bloodshot. She was supposed to be.
Pure.
She was supposed to be mine. We were going to build our company from an attic room with one space heater. We were going to share every crust of bread. When I became CEO, everyone would have known that she was the only one who stood by me when I was nothing. I looked up into his face. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel annoyed. I felt an overwhelming, suffocating wave of pity. You didn't want a partner, Sean, I said softly. You wanted an audience.
You.
Wanted someone to suffer beside you so that your eventual success would taste
Sweeter.
You needed her to be hungry so you could feel like a hero every time. You handed her a scrap. Shut up, he snarled, raising his hand. You know nothing about. The lab door swung wide, hitting the rubber wall stopper with a sharp, echoing crack. Jasper stood in the entryway. He wasn't breathing hard, but his coat was unbuttoned, and his hands were clenched at his sides. Behind him stood the head of the science department, Dr. Vance, and 2 campus security officers. Step away from my sister, Jasper said. His voice was terrifyingly calm, devoid of any adolescent heat, carrying the cold, absolute finality of an executioner. Sean looked at Jasper, then at Dr. Vance, then down at the flash drive in his
palm. No, no, no.
This is a setup. The villain planned this. Sean, run. Don't let them take your future. Dr. Vance, Jasper said, never taking his eyes off Sean. At 7:14 p.m., an unauthorized external storage device accessed the secure local drive assigned to Project A-12. The security protocols I installed on this terminal logged the MAC address, the file transfer signatures, and initiated a continuous video recording via the overhead workstation camera. Dr. Vance's face was white with shock and disappointment. Sean, is this true? Sean didn't answer. He looked at the 3 of us, at Jasper's unyielding stance, at the security officers stepping forward, and finally at me, standing calmly by
The door.
He threw the flash drive onto the floor. The plastic casing shattered against the linoleum. You think you won? Sean hissed as the security guards took him by the arms. You think this ends here? You're all living a lie. Every single one of you. As they dragged him down the hallway, his voice echoing off the high lockers, the floating text above my head began to flicker violently, the letters breaking apart into static noise. Error. Plot divergence exceeds 85%. Male lead character integrity compromise. Reevaluating narrative core. I reached out with my shoe, kicked the broken plastic shard of the flash drive under a cabinet, and turned to Jasper. Did you really install an automated camera script? I asked. Jasper adjusted his glasses. Obviously. I've known he was an idiot since we were 9. Sean was expelled from St. Jude's the following morning. There was no grand public scandal. Dad didn't use his influence to crush him in the press, and Naomi didn't go to see him off. The administration simply revoked his scholarship for gross academic dishonesty, packed his locker into a single cardboard box, and escorted him beyond the wrought iron gates. For the next 4 years, the world moved forward with a steady, quiet momentum of ordinary life. We graduated from the senior academy. Jasper entered the dual degree program in computer science and quantitative economics at the state's premier university. Naomi was accepted into an elite 7-year direct medical program, her research on low-cost diagnostic assays earning her a national undergraduate fellowship.
I
Took over the operational development wing of Croft Enterprises Youth Incubator, funding projects for kids who actually wanted to build things rather than play the role of tragic martyrs. The floating text had become faint and translucent, appearing only occasionally, like a fading radio signal. Naomi Croft published her first peer-reviewed paper in the Journal of Cellular Medicine. Wait, why is her last name Croft now? Sean was spotted working at an independent auto-tuning shop in the industrial district. He's still trying to pitch his early-generation engine controller, but the market already standardized Jasper Croft's firmware 3 years ago. Is this story actually better this way? I laughed aloud the first time I saw that last comment. The audience in the sky was finally growing up. Then came the night of Naomi's 20th birthday. We had rented the private conservatory dining room at the Grand Harbor Hotel, the same place Dad had taken us the night our adoption papers had been formally finalized 10 years earlier. Mrs. Gable was there, sitting in an armchair by the fireplace with a glass of sparkling cider. Dad sat at the head of the long mahogany table, smiling warmly as Naomi blew out the candles on a towering strawberry shortcake. Make a wish. I nudged her elbow. Naomi closed her eyes for 3 seconds, then blew. When she opened them, she looked around the table. At Dad, at Jasper, who was pretending not to be interested in the cake frosting, and finally at me. I didn't make a wish, she said softly. Why not? I asked, slicing into the cake. Because everything I ever could have wanted is already sitting in this room. Before I could tease her for being overly sentimental, the phone in Jasper's pocket vibrated. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his jaw instantly
Tightened.
He looked across the table at Dad. Security at the West Storage Annex just triggered a silent alarm. The perimeter sensors picked up an individual attempting to breach the research vehicle bays.
Dad didn't panic.
He set his wine glass down with a soft, controlled chime.
Did.
They notify municipal dispatch. Yes, Jasper said, standing up. The intruder bypassed the secondary magnetic locks using an obsolete maintenance override code. The only person who had access to that specific legacy archive was Sean. I finished the sentence for him. Naomi's hand rested on the table. She didn't tremble. She looked at Jasper, then at me, her expression calm, measured, and resolute. Let's go, Naomi said. Naomi, you don't need to be there, Dad said gently. Yes, I do, she replied, her voice ringing with the quiet authority of an adult who knew exactly who she was. He spent 10 years claiming he was doing everything for me. It's time he finally hears the truth without an audience. The rain was falling in long, silver needles when our car pulled up to the Croft Enterprises Tech Annex. Flashing blue and red lights painted the concrete wetly, throwing long, grotesque shadows against the corrugated steel of the warehouse doors.
2.
Police cruisers were parked at an angle, their engines idling. In the center of the loading bay, surrounded by 3 officers with their hands on their
Ulsters stood San.
He was 21 now, but he looked 40. His jacket was drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead, his face gaunt and sunken from years of rage, cheap tobacco, and sleepless nights spent nursing a grudge that the world had long forgotten. He had a crowbar on the pavement at his feet and a crumpled folder of outdated patents clutched against his ribs. When our car doors opened, his head snapped up. The glowing text in my eyes flared one last time, blindingly bright, like a bulb, burning out in a final dying surge. Final chapter. The hero's last stand. The truth will be revealed.
Sean didn't look at the police.
He didn't look at Jasper or me. He lunged forward against the grip of the officer holding his arm, screaming Naomi's name, with a raw, bleeding desperation that cracked against the concrete walls. Naomi, look at them. Look at what they turned you into. He shrieked, rain spraying from his lips. You're wearing silk. You're driving their cars. You were supposed to be the light of my life. We were supposed to rise from the gutter together. Naomi walked past the police tape. She didn't stop until she was 5 feet from him, standing just beyond the sweep of his reach. She wore a long wool trench coat over her birthday dress. Her hands were tucked into her pockets, her gaze steady, mournful, and clean.
Sean, she said.
Her voice cut through the sound of the rain and the idling engines with effortless clarity. There was never a we. Sean's breath hitched.
What?
Even at the orphanage, Naomi said, you never asked me if I was cold. You never asked me what I wanted to study. You told me what we were going to be. You told me that if I endured the hunger, one day everyone would envy us. You didn't love me, Sean. You loved the idea of having a witness to your greatness. I saved you, he roared, thrashing against the officer's grip. In the life before this, you died in a hospital bed with no one holding your hand because I was too late. I came back to give you everything. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the steady hiss of rain. On the metal roof, Naomi looked at him for a long, quiet moment. There was no hatred in her eyes. There was only the vast, empty distance between 2 people who were never meant to share a world. If you came back, Naomi said gently, you should have used your second life to be happy. Instead, you used it to build a cage and tried to drag me inside it. She turned her back on him. Naomi, Naomi, look at me. Naomi. His screams dissolved into the wail of the police siren as they forced him into the back of the cruiser. The car turned around, its tires hissing over the wet asphalt, and carried him away into the dark city streets. Above my head, the glowing letters began to shatter. System integrity failing. Plot line dissolved. Characters freed from narrative constraints. Goodbye, villainess. Thank you for taking care of our girl. The text dissolved into tiny, golden motes of light that drifted upward into the rainy night, vanishing between the clouds until the sky was just a vast, quiet expanse of black and silver. I stood there for a long time, watching the empty air where the words used to.
Live.
Ivy. A soft hand slipped into mine. Naomi was standing beside me, her fingers warm and familiar against my palm. On my other side, Jasper stepped up, quietly, opening a large black umbrella and holding it over our heads, shielding us from the downpour. Is everything okay? Naomi asked, searching my face. I looked at her. My sister, brilliant, fearless, and whole. I looked at Jasper, my brother, sharp, protective, and unshakable. And then I looked back toward the car, where Dad was waiting with the heater, running, holding 3 dry towels and a thermos of Mrs. Gable's hot cocoa. Everything is perfect, I said, squeezing her hand tight. Let's go home and finish that cake.